Ireland is a land of mystery. Tales of ghosts, banshees, stone circles and witchcraft have survived for centuries, through good times and bad. Fierce battles, extreme wealth, poverty and division have contributed to fascinating tales of the paranormal. Welcome to the Ghosts of Ireland. The Hellfire Club is the name given to a 300-year-old ruined hunting lodge that stands windowless and exposed in the centre of a clearing at the top of Montpellier Hill. Stories of debauchery, satanic rituals, executions, sacrifice, cannibalism and the appearance of the devil make this eerie location an integral part of Irish folklore. This site was considered sacred. It was the location of standing stones and a Neolithic passage grave covered with a cairn of stones. In 1725, William Connolly, a wealthy politician and lawyer, bought the land and decided to build a hunting lodge on the same spot, destroying the grave and removing the standing stones to construct part of his fireplace. Rumours amongst the locals quickly circulated that Connolly was disturbing forces best left alone. Fears grew, and not long after the construction, the building's slate roof blew off in a fierce storm. The work of the devil, it was said. Determined, Connolly replaced the roof with stone, keyed together like a bridge, and this structure, 300 years later, is still intact. After Connolly's death in 1729, the building passed to Richard Parsons, the first Earl of Ross. Described as a sorcerer, dabbler in black magic, and a man of humour and frolic. Along with James Worsdale and Lord Blaney, the Hellfire Club of Ireland was formed. The earliest meetings of the Irish Hellfire Club took place in the Eagle Tavern on Cork Hill, close to Dublin Castle. Whilst the Hellfire Club is the name given to William Connolly's hunting lodge, the club refers to several exclusive groups of powerful society figures in Britain and Ireland in the 18th century, known for immoral behaviour and debauchery fuelled by gambling, alcohol and sex. The secrecy surrounding the club led to rumours of satanic ritual, devil worship, animal and human sacrifice. A local farmer's daughter was said to have been kidnapped, murdered and eaten by the members of the club in Dublin. The remote location at the lodge was perfect for such activities, and stories began to circulate. Black masses involving naked priests imitating Catholic ceremonies were allegedly performed, with black cats being sacrificed as an offering to the devil. After a parishioner had mysteriously vanished, a local, genuine Catholic priest decided to investigate the activities at the lodge. One night, the priest was said to have interrupted the so-called mass, was hauled in by the drunken men, where he witnessed a large black cat being worshipped. A struggle ensued, and the priest broke free of his captors, grasped the cat, and quickly recited an exorcism. At that moment, the cat tore to pieces, and a demon flew out from its body and crashed through the roof, scattering debris over the drunken men. A young farmhand, overcome with curiosity, wanted to discover the real goings-on at the club's secret meetings. He made his way up Montpellier Hill, and to his surprise he was invited in by the members and allowed to observe the night's activities. The following day, he was found terrified and shaking. Legend says he spent the rest of his life unable to speak, so shocking were the events that he must have witnessed. His white, gaunt figure has been seen in the woods surrounding the lodge, as well as in the building itself, his head bowed down in shame. A notorious story of the Hellfire Club centres on a visit from the devil himself. An unexpected stranger, wearing a dark cloak and carrying a purse full of money, joined the club members at a game of cards. The evening progressed with much revelry, until one of the players dropped a card on the floor. He bent down to retrieve it and witnessed that the stranger had cloven hooves instead of feet. Terrified, the man continued to play until he couldn't keep the secret any longer. He declared the men were in the presence of the devil. The stranger immediately laughed wildly and burst into flames and vanished. The man who saw the hooves died shortly after. There's a similar myth surrounding Loftus Hall in County Wexford. However, the devil became white smoke and travelled through the ceiling. No one knows for certain how the fire that engulfed the building happened, but it is generally attributed to Richard Chapel-Warley, a descendant of Oliver Cromwell. Warley's tyrannical acts included riding around the rural lands on Sunday mornings, setting alight the thatched roofs of Catholic chapels, earning him the sobriquet Burn Chapel-Warley. The story suggests that one evening after a black mass had been held inside the lodge, the inebriated members began their usual debauched sexual acts. A steward, struggling to manoeuvre through the numerous writhing bodies, accidentally dropped a glass of brandy over Warley's coat. Outraged, Warley sprang up, poured brandy over the steward and promptly set him alight. The flailing man ran down the stairs and through the hall, where he set a nearby tapestry ablaze. The entire hunting lodge was quickly enveloped by fire. Warley and some of his acquaintances leapt from the windows, but many were so drunk they were unable to escape and perished in the flames. Locals were convinced this was revenge for the disturbances of the sacred land and against the members of the Hellfire Club. Named after Fulco de la Fren, this impressive Anglo-Norman tower is set in beautiful countryside. The current castle was built in the 15th century by the Purcell family, who sided with the Royalists during the English Civil War, but the castle has a dark past. The Swift family, relatives of Jonathan Swift, have been connected to the castle since 1857. It was here that Godwin Swift tested his primitive version of an aircraft. He named the device the aerial chariot and launched it from the top of the castle using a catapult, his butler acting as a pilot. On its launch, the plane immediately nosedived and hit the ground, fracturing many of the butler's bones. The ghost of a soldier returns every November to the scene of his violent death. His loud footsteps are heard climbing the narrow spiral staircase as he heads to the ramparts at the top of the tower. He fell asleep on guard duty many centuries ago. When he was discovered during an inspection, his brutal general threw the sleeping man to his death. The spirit of a ghostly lady is felt as a presence on the winding staircase. She is thought to be the daughter of a former owner of the castle who fell in love with a young soldier. Her father felt this match was beneath her and forbid them to meet in the future. Some say she was locked in the tower and was starved to death, or even murdered by her father. In another version of the story, the girl refused to accept her father's decision and in a tantrum ran screaming towards the spiral staircase. She tripped over her flowing skirts and fell headfirst to the very bottom and broke her neck. Some say she is responsible for the scent of flowers and cold spots on the stairs, and some report hearing the rustling of her skirts across the stones as she repeats her fatal accident once more. On the north side of the city of Dublin lies Summerhill, a residential area of the city with a haunted past. In 1779, John Hutton and Sons of Summerhill, a coach building company, was founded in the area. The company grew and became very successful, securing contracts for the Lord Mayor of Dublin's coach built in 1791 and even the Irish state coach, still used by the British royal family. Wealthy members of the Hutton family lived in several homes in a Georgian tenement building, 116, 17 and 18 Summerhill. In 1966, the decision was made to demolish the ageing properties to make way for a new bus depot for Dublin Bus. It seems the workmen disturbed a resident from the past. Demolition was paused due to unexplained events. Mr. Joseph Burns, one of the contractors, reported that he'd been trying to move a heavy old stove located in the basement when he felt uneasy, as though he was being watched. He turned to check if he was on his own and saw nobody there. He continued to work moving the heavy old stove, and once again he had the same feeling of being watched and even followed. Turning around once more, he saw it, a man dressed in what looked like a striped butcher's coat, standing with his gaze fixed out of the window. He called for the other workmen to come quickly, but when they arrived they were unable to see the man. Over the years, during the Hutton's occupations of the houses at Summerhill, numbers 116 and 17 in particular developed a reputation for ghostly phenomena. Rumours spread about the ghostly figure, and small groups of onlookers would wait patiently from a distance across the road, desperately hoping for a glimpse of the phantom. The basement of 116 was particularly active, with reports of strange sensations and cold spots on the staircase. Deliberate and loud bangs were heard on the heavy wooden doors, startling residents and guests. In 1863, the resident of 118 Summerhill, Patrick Conway, slit his throat. He was a butcher. Castledonovan is thought to have been built around 1560 by Donald of the Hydes. This ruined castle was constructed to protect the northern borders of land belonging to a sept of the O'Donovans. Built with 6-foot thick walls made of lime, sand, gravel, horsehair and animal blood, the castle was attacked and blown up in 1649 by Cromwell's troops, in retaliation for Donald III O'Donovan siding with the Stuarts in the Irish Rebellion of 1641. The ground floor chambers, ceilings and archways drip water all year round and have done for centuries. It is said that this was caused by a horrific event that happened hundreds of years ago in one of the now ruined chambers above. Donald III O'Donovan, the final owner of the castle before its demise, had borrowed a considerable sum of money from a wealthy local woman named Dorothy Ford. Months later, she came to the castle looking to discuss the debt. Once inside the first floor chamber, O'Donovan's troops grabbed her and hanged her from a beam in the tower. Her death, as far as he was concerned, cleared the debt forever. The relatives of Dorothy Ford were outraged and terrified. They cursed the castle, stating that Dorothy's tears should flow until the O'Donovan family had disappeared forever. Nearly 400 years have passed, and legend still says that Dorothy's tears continue to leak from the ceilings and archways of Castledonovan. Charles Fort is a superb example of military architecture dating back to 1677. It was built on this wild and rocky coastline to protect the area, specifically the harbour, from use by the French and Spanish in the event of a landing in Ireland. It is home to a resident ghost, whose doomed figure silently haunts due to a devastating family tragedy. Colonel Warrender, a strict military man, was appointed governor shortly after the fort was built. His daughter, whose name was Wilful, lived a privileged life at the fort and soon caught the eye of a young officer, thought to be named Trevor. They fell in love, and very quickly they became engaged. They married shortly afterwards, and that evening they walked hand in hand along the battlements, contemplating their new life together and reflecting on the festivities of their wedding day. Looking over the battlements and down towards the sea, Wilful pointed to some unusual flowers growing on the rocks beneath the fort and asked her new husband to retrieve some for her. A nearby sentry offered to climb down and pick the flowers as a gesture to the newlyweds, provided Trevor could cover his place on duty. This was agreed, and Trevor quickly took up duty wearing the sentry's coat and holding his musket, while the soldier looked for ropes to assist him over the side of the fort. He started his perilous descent, having secured his line, and Trevor began his duty. It became a more time-consuming task than had been expected. Wilful became cold in the chilly evening breeze and returned inside the fort. After hours of patiently waiting, Trevor, with the merriment that accompanied the day, grew weary and soon accidentally fell asleep. Night fell, and it wasn't long before Colonel Warrender made his routine inspection of the sentries. He came across the reclining figure and immediately challenged the sentry to speak. No answer was given. Assuming the man was asleep, he drew his pistol in anger and fired directly through the soldier's heart, killing him instantly. It was only then the colonel realised he'd made a fatal error. On hearing the news of her husband's death, the bride, overwhelmed by grief, threw herself over the battlements. Later that night, consumed by guilt for his hasty decision, her father shot himself. Decades passed, and accounts of sightings of a mysterious white lady became more frequent. Major Black became the fort major at Kinsale after the Peninsular War in 1814. Whilst he was inside the hallway of his residence, he witnessed the white lady enter through the front door and proceed to climb up the stairs. He figured she was the wife of a soldier who had accidentally got lost, but on closer observation, he noticed she wasn't making any sound on the stairs and her dress was very old-fashioned. He quickly followed her into one of the bedrooms, where she completely vanished. Other eyewitnesses included children living at the fort. 2 sergeants were asked to pack some articles for Major Black when the young daughter of one of the men said, "Who is that white lady bending over the banisters and looking down at us?" Neither of the men could see anyone at the top of the stairs, but the little girl was adamant that she had seen a young woman dressed in white, smiling. Her face described as corpse-like and colourless, yet still beautiful. It seems the white lady is drawn towards children, although her presence isn't always well received. An officer and his wife, living in the governor's house, were woken up by their child's nurse, who had been sleeping in the nursery next door. She reported seeing the figure of the white lady enter through the wall and glide towards the sleeping infant. The phantom reached for the child's arm, made contact, and at that moment the little boy woke and shouted, "Take your cold hand from my wrist." The white lady immediately vanished. In the early 20th century, a surgeon had a more violent encounter with the white lady. One evening, he went to his room to prepare for dinner. Oddly, he failed to appear at the table, and some of the officers decided to investigate his whereabouts. They found him lying at the foot of the stairs, unconscious and barely breathing. A while later, he recounted the story. He'd climbed the stairs to his front door, crouched down to retrieve his key from under the doormat, and suddenly felt himself being dragged and thrown with considerable force down the flight of stairs. As he fell, he saw the white lady at the bottom of the steps, looking on with her pale, expressionless face. A few months later, Captain Jarves, also stationed at the fort, had a similar experience. He struggled to unlock his front door. He furiously tried to push the door inwards, when an extreme gust of wind overcame him, and he felt an unseen force pushing down the flight of stairs behind him. It seems the restless soul of Wilful still haunts the fort even to this day.